They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's rebirth. Marcus Thompson stood in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, watching 300 guests slowly realize that the bride wasn't coming. The whispers started as scattered murmurs, then grew into a crescendo of uncomfortable shifting and nervous glances. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Victoria Hayes, daughter of Riverside Heights' most prominent financial dynasty, had vanished without a trace 30 minutes before their ceremony at the prestigious Grandview Country Club. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming when Victoria tried the same stunt 2 years later at her wedding to another man. Marcus was ready. This time he didn't wait to be humiliated. This time he walked away first, straight into the arms of the one woman who had been there through it all, Elena Rodriguez, the wedding planner who had witnessed his devastation and helped him rebuild not just his confidence, but his entire understanding of what love could truly be. The autumn of 2019 painted Riverside Heights in shades of gold and crimson. The wealthy suburb nestled along the Connecticut River, where old money met new ambition. Marcus Thompson had everything a 28-year-old architect could want: a thriving firm he'd built from scratch, stunning colonial home with river views, what everyone believed was the perfect engagement to Victoria Hayes. Their relationship had been the talk of Riverside Heights for 3 years, a fairy tale romance that began at a charity gala and blossomed into what society magazines called the wedding of the decade. Marcus had proposed at the very spot where they first danced, the grand ballroom of the Riverside Country Club. With Victoria's father Robert watching approvingly from the sidelines, the Hayes family had made their fortune in financial consulting, building an empire that stretched from Hartford to Boston. Victoria was their crown jewel, Harvard Business School graduate, accomplished equestrian, and heir to a legacy that demanded perfection in all things, including marriage partners. The proposal had been orchestrated with military precision. Marcus spent 3 months working with Elena Rodriguez from Elena's Events & Co., the premier wedding planning service in the area. Elena had a reputation for creating magical moments, but she was also known for her ability to read people, to understand what they truly wanted versus what they thought they should want. During their initial consultation, she had studied Marcus carefully as he described his vision for the proposal. Elena's office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian mansion in downtown Riverside, our space filled with inspiration boards, fabric samples, and photographs of countless perfect moments she had created for other couples. She was 31, with warm brown eyes that seemed to catch every detail and dark hair that she often tucked behind her ear when she was thinking. Her business partner Sarah Mitchell handled the logistics, while Elena focused on the emotional architecture of events, understanding that great celebrations were built on authentic feelings rather than expensive decorations. When Marcus first walked into her office, Elena noticed several things immediately. He was nervous, constantly checking his phone and adjusting his tie. He spoke about Victoria with admiration but not passion, describing her accomplishments rather than the way she made him feel. Most telling of all, he seemed more concerned with creating the perfect proposal than with expressing his actual feelings. Elena had seen this before: clients who were in love with the idea of being in love, who confused social expectations with personal desires. But Marcus was different somehow. Beneath the surface anxiety, she sensed something genuine, a man who truly wanted to do right by someone he cared about. She found herself paying extra attention to details, spending additional time perfecting elements that other planners might have rushed through. The proposal at the Riverside Country Club went flawlessly. Marcus had arranged for a string quartet to play Victoria's favorite song while he knelt beside their original table, presenting a 3-carat diamond ring that caught the chandelier light like captured starfire. Victoria said yes, of course, her smile radiant as applause erupted from the other diners. The moment was photographed for the society pages, cementing their status as Riverside Heights golden couple. Wedding planning began immediately, with Victoria's mother, Catherine Hayes, taking charge with the efficiency of a military commander. The guest list swelled to 300. The venue was booked at Grandview Country Club, and every detail was scrutinized to ensure it met the Hayes family standards. Elena found herself working more closely with Marcus than with Victoria, who seemed perpetually busy with her responsibilities at Hayes Financial Group. During their planning sessions, Elena began to see glimpses of who Marcus really was beneath the successful architect facade. He had grown up middle class in nearby Willowbrook, the son of a high school principal and a nurse. His success was self-made, built through talent, determination, countless 18-hour days establishing Thompson and Associates. He was thoughtful, asking detailed questions about vendors, and always ensuring that everyone involved in the wedding was treated with respect. Victoria, by contrast, seemed to view the wedding as another project to be managed, rather than a celebration to be enjoyed. She would arrive late to meetings, often taking calls during consultations, and rarely showed enthusiasm for the details that made Elena's events special. The disconnect was subtle but growing, and Elena found herself wondering if Marcus had noticed it too. 3 months into the planning process, during a late evening session at Elena's office, Marcus lingered after Victoria had left early for another commitment. Elena was organizing flower samples when she looked up to find him, staring out the window at the lights of downtown Riverside. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently, though she immediately regretted the question. It wasn't professional to probe into her client's relationship dynamics. Marcus turned, and for a moment, Elena saw something vulnerable in his expression. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to explore. Elena felt her heart rate quicken, recognizing the dangerous territory they were approaching. She had built her business on professionalism and boundaries. But something about Marcus made those lines feel blurrier than they should. "I think everyone questions big decisions," she replied carefully. Though her voice carried more understanding than professional detachment should allow, Marcus nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary before he gathered his things and left. Elena stayed late that night, telling herself she was working on centerpiece designs when she was really trying to understand why one client's happiness seemed to matter so much to her. The wedding preparations continued through the spring, gaining momentum like a boulder rolling downhill. Victoria threw herself into planning with renewed energy, perhaps sensing something she couldn't quite name. The guest list was finalized, the menu selected, and Elena's team executed every detail with their signature perfection. But Elena noticed that Marcus seemed to withdraw as the wedding date approached, becoming quieter during meetings and more focused on work. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Elena received an unexpected call from Victoria. Instead of discussing final details, Victoria wanted to meet privately without Marcus's present. They arranged to meet at the Blue Moon Cafe, a quiet spot away from the usual Riverside Heights social circles. Victoria arrived precisely on time, looking polished and composed as always, but Elena detected tension in her posture. After ordering coffee, Victoria dispensed with small talk entirely. "I need to ask you something directly," Victoria said, her voice controlled but intense. "Is there something between you and Marcus?" Elena's coffee cup rattled slightly as she set it down, her surprise genuine. "I don't know what you mean," she replied, though even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Victoria leaned forward, her blue eyes sharp and calculating. "I've seen how he looks at you during our meetings. It's how he lights up when he talks about your ideas." "I'm not naive, Elena." The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow, not because it was false, but because it was uncomfortably close to truth she had been trying to ignore. Over the months of planning, she had developed feelings for Marcus that went far beyond professional interest. She admired his integrity, his kindness to everyone involved in their events, the way he really listened when people spoke. But she had convinced herself that these feelings were one-sided, a dangerous fantasy that could destroy her business if she ever acted on them. "Victoria," Elena said carefully, "Marcus loves you. He's marrying you. Whatever you think you've seen, he's marrying the idea of me," Victoria interrupted, her composure cracking slightly. "The Hayes name, the social connections, the perfect life that looks good in the society pages. But that's not the same as love, is it?" The conversation ended with polite but strained pleasantries. but Elena left feeling shaken. Victoria's words forced her to confront something she had been avoiding, the possibility that Marcus was as conflicted about this marriage as she was about her feelings for him. But with only 2 weeks until the wedding, Elena threw herself into final preparations, determined to create a perfect day, regardless of her personal turmoil. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear. With October sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Grandview Country Club, Elena arrived early, as was her custom, overseeing the transformation of the ballroom into the elegant vision Victoria had requested. White roses and gold accents created an atmosphere of timeless sophistication. While Elena's team executed every detail with practiced precision, Marcus arrived for photos looking handsome but tense, his usual warm smile replaced by nervous energy. Elena caught his eye across the room and offered an encouraging nod, the same professional support she provided all her grooms. But when he smiled back, she felt that familiar flutter in her chest that reminded her just how much trouble she was in. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, with cocktails and dinner to follow. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By 3:30, guests were seated and Marcus stood at the altar with his best friend David Chen beside him. Elena positioned herself at the back of the room, her usual spot for monitoring the proceedings and handling any last-minute issues. At 3:45, Elena received a text from Victoria's maid of honor, Jennifer Walsh. She's not here. Victoria's gone. Elena's heart stopped. In 15 years of wedding planning, she had dealt with countless crises, but never a runaway bride. She immediately called Victoria's cell phone, then her parents, then checked the bridal suite. Victoria? Hayes had vanished, leaving behind her wedding dress, her flowers, and 300 guests waiting for a ceremony that would never happen. The next 30 minutes would haunt Elena's dreams for years to come. Watching Marcus realize that his bride wasn't coming, seeing his face transform from concern to confusion to devastating understanding, witnessing the whispered conversations that rippled through the assembled guests like wildfire, Elena found herself in the impossible position of managing a catastrophe while her heart broke for the man standing alone at the altar. When Marcus finally walked down the aisle, not with his bride, but by himself, past hundreds of pitying faces, Alan knew that nothing would ever be the same for any of them. The aftermath and awakening, the silence that followed. Victoria's disappearance stretched across Grandview Country Club like a suffocating blanket. Elena moved through the chaos with professional autopilot, her mind racing while her body performed the necessary tasks of damage control. She coordinated with the catering staff to serve dinner to the bewildered guests, arranged for the photographers to pack their equipment discreetly, and handled the delicate conversations with family members who demanded explanations she didn't have. Marcus had retreated to the groom's preparation room, where David Chen found him sitting on a leather chair, still in his tuxedo, staring at nothing. Elena hesitated outside the door, uncertain whether her presence would be welcome or appropriate. Through the crack, she could hear David's voice, steady and supportive as always. "The deposits are recoverable for most vendors," David was saying practically. "Insurance should cover the major expenses." "This isn't your fault, Marcus, isn't it?" Marcus's voice was hollow, barely recognizable. 3 years together and I never saw this coming. "What does that say about me?" Elena knocked softly, and entered when David gestured her inside. Marcus looked up, and she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tighten. Not just hurt or embarrassment, but a deeper questioning, as if he was reevaluating everything he thought he knew about himself. "The guests are taken care of," she said gently. "Most have left, but your family is waiting whenever you're ready. There's no rush." Marcus nodded absently, then looked directly at her. "You knew, didn't you? When Victoria asked to meet with you alone last week, you knew she was going to do this." Elena felt the weight of his gaze, the burden of knowledge she had carried without knowing how to act on it. "I knew she was having doubts. But Marcus, I never imagined she would handle it this way. No one deserves to be left at the altar." "She asked about you," Marcus said quietly, ignoring David's surprised expression, "about whether there was something between us. I told her she was being ridiculous, that you were our wedding planner and nothing more." The words hung in the air, creating a tension that David seemed to sense even without understanding its source. Elena felt her face flush, aware that they were approaching territory that could destroy what little professional relationship remained. She was looking for excuses. Elena said carefully. Sometimes people create problems to justify decisions they've already made. But even as she said it, Elena wondered if Victoria had seen something real. Something that Elena and Marcus had been too careful or too afraid to acknowledge. The months of planning sessions, the late evening consultations, the way Marcus's eyes would find hers across crowded rooms during vendor meetings. Had their connection been as obvious to others as it had been invisible to themselves? David cleared his throat, breaking the spell. We should get you home, Marcus. This has been enough for one day. Elena excused herself, but not before catching Marcus's hand briefly. This isn't the end of your story, she said softly. It's just a very painful chapter. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of returned gifts, canceled reservations, and carefully worded explanations to vendors and friends. Elena threw herself into other clients' events, trying to distance herself from the emotional wreckage of the Hayes-Thompson wedding. But Marcus seemed to appear everywhere in her professional world. Their social circles overlapped more than she had realized. Riverside Heights was too small to avoid someone indefinitely. She saw him first at Amanda Foster's flower shop, where Elena was selecting arrangements for another wedding. Marcus was there ordering flowers for his office, something bright to counteract what he jokingly called his tragic bachelor pad aesthetic. He looked better than he had at the club, though Elena noticed the shadows under his eyes and the way his smile didn't quite reach them. Elena, he said, seeming genuinely pleased to see her. How are you holding up? I realize this whole situation probably wasn't great for your business reputation. A consideration for her professional welfare, even in the midst of his own crisis, was so typically Marcus that Elena felt her carefully constructed emotional barriers beginning to crack. I'm fine, she said. More importantly, how are you? They ended up having coffee at the Blue Moon Cafe, the same place where Victoria had confronted Elena weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, but the conversation felt natural. Easier than it had ever been when wedding planning created boundaries between them. Marcus talked about the relief he felt beneath the embarrassment. The growing realization that Victoria had done them both a favor by being honest about her feelings, even if her timing was catastrophic. Lena found herself sharing stories about her business, her dreams of expanding beyond wedding planning into full event coordination. The challenges of building something meaningful in a world that often valued appearance over substance. You know what the strangest part is? Marcus said, stirring his coffee absently. I keep thinking about all the conversations we had during the planning process. You asked questions that Victoria never did. About what I actually wanted, not what looked good or what my family expected. Elena felt her heart rate quickened. Wedding planners learn to dig deeper. It's part of creating authentic celebrations. Is that all it was? Marcus asked, his eyes meeting hers directly. Professional thoroughness? The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Elena knew that her answer could change everything, that the professional distance she had maintained for months was about to crumble entirely. No, she said quietly. It wasn't. The admission seemed to surprise them both. Marcus leaned back, in his chair, processing her honesty, while Elena wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. I thought so, Marcus said finally. I hoped so, actually. Which probably makes me a terrible person, considering I was engaged to someone else at the time. It makes you human, Elena replied. Feelings don't follow convenient timelines. Their relationship shifted after that conversation, though they were both careful not to rush into anything that might seem like a rebound romance. Marcus began stopping by Elena's office occasionally, sometimes with legitimate business questions, about vendor referrals, but increasingly just to talk. Elena found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. Sarah Mitchell, Elena's business partner, noticed the change immediately. She had been Elena's friend since college, and she could read Elena's moods like a weather report. You're glowing. Sarah observed one afternoon after Marcus had left following a 2-hour conversation about the challenges of running a creative business in a traditional town. Actually glowing? It's disgusting, Lena protested, but Sarah wasn't fooled. Elena, you've been professional and careful your entire career. You've never so much as flirted with a client or gotten personally involved in their dramas. But this one is different. He was never really my client, Elena said weakly. Victoria was. Right? And where is Victoria now? The question was rhetorical, but it highlighted the complexity of Elena's situation. Victoria had vanished from Riverside Heights entirely, reportedly taking a position with a financial firm in San Francisco. The Hayes family maintained dignified silence about the entire affair. Though Catherine Hayes had personally called Elena to apologize for her daughter's behavior and to ensure that Elena's business didn't suffer from association with the scandal, meanwhile, Marcus was rebuilding his life with characteristic determination. He threw himself into new architectural projects, including the renovation of an old warehouse in downtown Riverside that would become affordable artist studios. Elena watched him transform personal pain into creative purpose. Her admiration deepened into something more profound than attraction. Their friendship evolved slowly through the winter months. Marcus would appear at Elena's events as a guest of other clients. They would find reasons to talk long after professional obligations ended. Elena discovered his passion for sustainable design, his volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, the way he remembered details about everyone he met. Marcus learned about Elena's family, her Mexican heritage that influenced her aesthetic sensibilities, her dreams of creating a wedding planning empire that prioritized authentic love over expensive spectacle. The turning point came in February. During the blizzard that shut down most of Connecticut for 3 days, Elena was stranded at her office when the storm hit, having stayed late to work on proposals. The heating system failed around midnight, and she was facing a cold, uncomfortable night when Marcus appeared at her door with blankets, hot coffee, and a generator he had borrowed from a construction site. "How did you even get here?" Elena asked, grateful but amazed that anyone would venture out in the storm. "Very carefully," Marcus replied, setting up the generator with practiced efficiency. "Sarah called me when she couldn't reach you. Figured I'd be stubborn enough to actually drive through this weather." They spent the night talking, sharing stories and dreams, while snow continued to fall outside. Sometime around dawn, when Elena had fallen asleep against Marcus's shoulder and he was watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered streets in shades of pink and gold, both of them realized that what they felt was no longer just attraction or friendship. It was love, deep and real, and worth whatever complications it might bring. When Elena woke to find herself curled against Marcus's chest, she felt a moment of panic followed by profound rightness. This was where she belonged, with this man who had weathered his own storm and emerged stronger and more genuine than before. "Good morning," Marcus said softly, his voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "Good morning," Elena replied, not moving away from the warmth of his embrace. They kissed for the first time as dawn light streamed through her office windows, and Elena felt something settle into place in her heart that she hadn't realized was missing. This was different from anything she had experienced before, built on months of genuine friendship and mutual respect rather than just chemistry or convenience. When the storm cleared and life returned to normal, Marcus and Elena faced the challenge of navigating their new relationship in the fishbowl environment of Riverside Heights. They were careful and discreet, but the connection between them was evident to anyone who bothered to look. Elena worried about her professional reputation, about clients who might question her judgment or assume she made a habit of pursuing engaged men. Marcus addressed those concerns with characteristic directness. "Anyone who knows you understands the kind of person you are," he told her. "And anyone who doesn't know you isn't worth worrying about." Their relationship became public gradually, through shared appearances at community events and subtle changes in their social media presence. The reaction was mixed but mostly positive. Many people in Riverside Heights had witnessed Marcus's humiliation at the altar and were happy to see him finding happiness. Others, particularly those loyal to the Hayes family, maintained polite but chilly distance. Elena's business not only survived the gossip, but actually grew. Clients appreciated her obvious understanding of real relationships versus performative ones. And her reputation for creating authentic celebrations attracted couples who valued substance over spectacle. Marcus's architectural firm also thrived, his personal happiness translating into creative energy that impressed clients and competitors alike. By summer, they were openly together, and deeply in love. Marcus had never felt so understood or supported. While Elena discovered the joy of being with someone who celebrated her ambition rather than feeling threatened by it, they complemented each other perfectly, steady strength balancing her creative energy. Her intuitive understanding helping him process emotions he had always struggled to express. They were building something real and lasting, something that felt like it could withstand any storm. What they didn't know was that Victoria Hayes was about to return to Riverside Heights, bringing with her a new fiancé and a wedding that would test everything they had built together. The return and reckoning, the invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in late August. It's delivered to Elena's office in an envelope so thick and elegant it practically screamed expensive taste. Sarah Mitchell brought it to Elena's desk with raised eyebrows and a knowing smirk that immediately put Elena on edge. "You're going to want to see this," Sarah said, sliding the cream-colored envelope across Elena's mahogany desk. "It's addressed to Elena's Events & Co., but I have a feeling this is personal." Elena recognized the handwriting immediately, though it had been nearly a year since she'd seen Victoria's distinctive script. Her stomach dropped as she opened the invitation, revealing gold-embossed lettering on heavy cardstock that announced the upcoming nuptials of Victoria Catherine Hayes and James Michael Sullivan. The wedding was scheduled for October 15th at the Crystal Ballroom, one of Elena's biggest competitors in the luxury wedding market. But what made Elena's blood run cold wasn't the announcement itself, it was the handwritten note attached. In Victoria's familiar handwriting, "Elena, I hope you can attend as my guest. There are some things we need to discuss. I think you'll find this celebration particularly interesting. XOO Victoria." Elena stared at the invitation for several minutes, her mind racing through the implications. Victoria was back in Riverside Heights after more than a year of silence. She was marrying someone Elena had never heard of, and she was specifically inviting the woman whose relationship with her former fiancé had become the subject of considerable local gossip. Nothing about this felt coincidental or innocent. Sarah peered over Elena's shoulder and whistled low. "Well, this is either a genuine olive branch or the most passive-aggressive power play in Riverside Heights history. My money's on the latter." Elena called Marcus immediately, reading him the invitation over the phone. The silence that followed her recitation stretched long enough that she wondered if the call had dropped. "Marcus, are you there?" "I'm here," he said finally, his voice tight with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "I just can't believe she's actually doing this. You knew she was back?" Another pause. "David heard rumors a few weeks ago. Something about her taking a position with Sullivan and Associates downtown. I didn't think she'd actually stay, and I certainly didn't expect this." Elena found herself gripping the phone tighter than necessary.
"Ow."
"Do you know anything about James Sullivan?" "Unfortunately, yes. He's the son of Richard Sullivan, who owns half the commercial real estate between here and Hartford. Old money, influential family, exactly the kind of connections Robert Hayes values in a son-in-law. The interesting part is that James has a reputation for being complicated." Elena didn't like the way Marcus said that word. Complicated how? "Let's just say he's been engaged twice before, and neither wedding actually happened. The first bride called it off 6 months before the ceremony. The second one disappeared entirely, moved to Europe from what I heard. There were whispers about his temper, about controlling behavior, but nothing that ever became public." The conversation left Elena feeling unsettled in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Victoria's sudden return, her choice to marry someone with a questionable romantic history, and especially her pointed invitation to Elena, suggested a level of planning that felt almost predatory. Elena had built her business on understanding people's motivations, and Victoria's behavior had all the hallmarks of someone orchestrating a very specific kind of drama. Over the next few weeks, Victoria's presence in Riverside Heights became increasingly visible. She appeared at charity events, society luncheons, and even at the Blue Moon Cafe, where she held court with old friends who seemed eager to welcome her back into the social fold. Elena began to notice that Victoria's appearances often coincided with places where she knew Elena and Marcus would be present. The first direct encounter happened at Amanda Foster's flower shop, where Elena was consulting on arrangements for a fall wedding. She was deep in conversation with Amanda about seasonal blooms when the door chime announced Victoria's entrance. Elena felt the shift in the shop's atmosphere immediately, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. "Elena," Victoria said warmly, approaching with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How wonderful to see you. I was hoping we'd run into each other before the wedding." Elena straightened, forcing herself to maintain professional composure. "Victoria, congratulations on your engagement. I'm sure you'll have a beautiful celebration." "Thank you. Though I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed you're not planning it. I've heard such wonderful things about your recent work. The Thompson wedding last month was absolutely stunning." The reference to Marcus's surname wasn't accidental, and Elena knew it. Victoria was probing, testing boundaries, establishing that she had been paying attention to Elena's relationship with her former fiancés. "Fiancés booked solid through next spring," Amanda interjected diplomatically, clearly sensing the undercurrents in the conversation. "The best planners always are." Victoria's smile sharpened slightly, of course, though I suppose some events are more personal than others, aren't they, Elena? "Some clients become more than just business relationships." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "I'm fortunate to work with wonderful people who often become friends. It's one of the joys of what I do." "Friends," Victoria repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, I imagine friendship is very important. In your line of work, trust, loyalty, professional boundaries, such delicate things to balance." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, Victoria maintaining perfect politeness while delivering subtle barbs that left Elena feeling like she'd been dissected with a very sharp, very elegant knife. When Victoria finally left, Elena realized her hands were shaking slightly. Amanda Foster, who had witnessed the entire exchange, shook her head in disgust. "That woman is up to something. Known her since high school, and she never does. Anything without a plan?" Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda was right. Victoria's behavior felt calculated, purposeful in ways that suggested more than casual social interaction. Elena began to notice patterns Victoria appearing at events where she knew Elena would be present, asking carefully worded questions about Elena's business and personal life, making comments that seemed designed to plant seeds of doubt or insecurity. The pressure increased when Victoria began reaching out directly. Phone calls to Elena's office with questions about vendor recommendations, invitations to lunch that Elena politely declined, and several attempts to schedule meetings about potential future collaboration. Each interaction felt like a chess move, Victoria positioning pieces for a game Elena didn't fully understand. Marcus noticed Elena's growing tension and confronted her about it one evening as they shared dinner at his house. "You've been different since Victoria came back. More guarded, more anxious. What's really going on?" Elena hesitated, unsure how to explain her growing sense of unease without sounding paranoid. "I think she's planning something. All these coincidental encounters, the comments about professional boundaries, the way she keeps trying to engage with me about her wedding plans, it feels deliberate." Marcus set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Elena, Victoria is many things, entitled, dramatic, selfish, but she's not stupid. If she's planning something, it won't be random or impulsive. She thinks strategically, always has. That's what worries me. Do you want me to talk to her? Make it clear that whatever game she's playing needs to stop." Elena considered the offer, then shook her head. "That might make things worse. If she's trying to create drama between us, having you ride to my rescue would probably give her exactly what she wants." But Elena's instincts proved correct when Victoria finally revealed her hand. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, too. Weeks before Victoria's wedding, Lena was reviewing final details for a weekend celebration when her assistant Lisa announced that Victoria Hayes was online too. "Elena," Victoria's voice was crisp and businesslike when Elena picked up. "I hope you have a few minutes to chat. I have a proposition that might interest you." "I'm listening," Elena said cautiously. "My wedding planner has had a family emergency and had to withdraw from my event. I know it's terribly short notice, but I'd like to hire Elena's Events & Co. to take over the final coordination. I'm prepared to pay triple your usual fee for the inconvenience." Elena's mind raced. Taking over another planner's event 2 weeks before the wedding was professional suicide. There wouldn't be time to understand the existing contracts, vendor relationships, or family dynamics. More importantly, Working Victoria's wedding would put Elena in an impossible position professionally and personally. Victoria, I appreciate the offer, but taking over an event this close to the date would be unfair to you and risky for my business. I'd be happy to recommend other planners who might be available. I'm not interested in other planners, Victoria said, her voice gaining an edge. I want you specifically. I think it would be fitting. The word choice sent chills down Elena's spine. Fitting how? Well, you were so involved in planning my last wedding attempt. I thought you might want to see how a real celebration looks when the bride actually shows up. Elena felt the breath leave her lungs. The implication was clear. Victoria knew about Elena's feelings for Marcus during the original wedding planning, and she was using that knowledge as leverage. Victoria, I think there's been a misunderstanding, has there? Because from where I sit, it looks like you built your relationship with my former fiancée on the ruins of my wedding day. Some might call that opportunistic. Others might question your professional ethics. Elena gripped the phone tighter, anger replacing shock. I never acted inappropriately while you were engaged to Marcus. Whatever happened between us began. Months after you abandoned him at the altar, did it though? Because I remember that conversation we had at the Blue Moon Calf quite differently. I remember asking about your feelings for my fiancé, and I remember you being less than honest about them, Elena realized. She was trapped in a conversation that Victoria had planned meticulously. Every word was being chosen to create maximum impact, to plant doubts that Elena would struggle to dispel. Here's what's going to happen, Victoria continued, her voice now cold and precise. You're going to plan my wedding. You're going to do it perfectly, professionally, and with a smile. And if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in Riverside Heights knows exactly how you really built your relationship with Marcus Thompson. I have friends at the Society magazine, connections with potential clients, influence you can't afford to ignore. Lena felt trapped between impossible choices. Accepting would put her in an untenable position, but refusing might trigger the very scandal Victoria was threatening to create. I need time to think about this, Elena said. Finally, you have until tomorrow morning, Victoria replied. I'll expect your answer by 10 a.m. The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at the phone and wondering how her happy, stable life had suddenly become a battlefield. Victoria Hayes had returned to Riverside Heights with a plan, and Elena was about to discover just how far someone would go to rewrite history in their favor. The trap springs and truth emerges. Elena spent that night staring at the ceiling of her bedroom. Marcus sleeping peacefully beside her, unaware of the storm brewing around them. Every instinct screamed that accepting Victoria's demand was professional suicide, but declining might be personal destruction. Victoria had positioned the situation brilliantly. There was no clean way out that didn't involve significant damage to either Elena's business or her relationship. At 6 in the morning, Elena gave up on sleep and drove to her office, hoping the familiar environment would help clarify her thinking. She found Sarah already there, brewing coffee and reviewing vendor contracts with the methodical precision that made her such an effective business partner. You look terrible, Sarah observed, without preamble. Want to tell me what's eating you alive, or should I guess? Given the timing, I'm betting it has something to do with Princess Victoria and her royal summons yesterday. Elena poured herself coffee and sank into the leather chair across from Sarah's desk.
Oh.
She wants us to take over her wedding planning. The entire event, 2 weeks out. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. It's either desperation or something more calculated. Knowing Victoria, I'm guessing the latter. What's the real angle here? Elena explained Victoria's ultimatum, watching Sarah's expression grow darker with each detail. When she finished, Sarah was quiet for several minutes, her business mind clearly working through the implications. This is extortion, Sarah said. Finally, professional blackmail designed to put you in an impossible position. If you take the job, you'll be working under duress, and everyone will know it. If you don't, she'll spread rumors that could damage our reputation and your relationship. With Marcus, I know, Elena said miserably. But what choice do I have? She's got enough social influence to make our lives very difficult if she wants to. Sarah leaned forward, her expression suddenly sharp with determination. Actually, I think you're missing something important here. Victoria's desperation is showing. Why would she need to threaten you into taking this job? Why not just hire one of the other excellent planners in the area? Elena hadn't considered that angle. Maybe she Really does want the symbolic victory of having me coordinate her successful wedding after her failed attempt with Marcus. Or maybe, Sarah said slowly, there's something about this wedding that other planners have already figured out. Something that made them unwilling to take the job even before her supposed family emergency. The possibility sent chills through Elena in 15 years of wedding planning. She had learned to read the warning signs of problematic events, unrealistic expectations, family drama, financial issues, or grooms who gave her bad feelings. Professional planners gossiped, and word traveled fast about couples who were difficult to work with. I need to make some calls, Elena said, reaching for her phone. If other planners have been turning down this job, I want to know why. The first call was to Richard Blake, whose high-end planning service competed directly with Elena's business, despite their professional rivalry. They maintained cordial relationships and occasionally shared information about problematic clients. Richard, it's Elena Rodriguez. I have a question about Victoria Hayes and her upcoming wedding to James Sullivan. The pause that followed was telling. Elena, please tell me you're not considering taking that job. Why? What do you know? Richard's sigh was audible through the phone. They approached me 3 weeks ago after their original planner withdrew. The retainer was generous, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. The groom was controlling, to the point of being frightening, and Victoria seemed, I don't know how to describe it, like she was performing a role rather than planning her actual wedding. Elena's stomach dropped. Controlling how? He insisted on approving every vendor personally, wanted detailed schedules of all meetings, and made several comments about his fiancée that made my skin crawl. Possessive doesn't begin to cover it. I got the distinct impression that Victoria wasn't entirely making her own choices about this wedding. Elena thanked Richard and immediately called to other planners in the area. Both had similar stories. Offers from Victoria's camp followed by uncomfortable interactions with James Sullivan that led them to decline the work. A pattern was emerging that painted Victoria not as a manipulative socialite seeking revenge, but as a woman, potentially, trapped in a dangerous situation. Sarah had been listening to Elena's calls with growing concern. This changes everything. If Victoria is in trouble, her ultimatum to you might be desperation rather than manipulation. Elena's phone rang before she could respond. Victoria's name appeared on the caller ID, and Elena answered with new awareness of the complexity of the situation. Elena, I hope you've had time to consider my offer, Victoria said. But her voice lacked the cold confidence of their previous conversation. Instead, Elena heard something that sounded like barely controlled panic. Victoria, we need to talk in person. Can you meet me at the Blue Moon Cafe in an hour? The silence stretched long enough that Elena wondered if Victoria had hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and frightened. I can't be seen talking to you privately. James monitors my schedule very carefully. Elena felt pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. Victoria, are you in danger? Another long pause. Please just take the job, Elena. I know how it sounded yesterday, but I'm asking as someone who needs help, not as someone trying to hurt you. The conversation ended with Elena agreeing to meet Victoria at the cafe, despite the risks Victoria had mentioned. She arrived early and chose a corner table with clear sight lines, her protective instincts activated by the fear in Victoria's voice. Victoria appeared precisely on time. The confident socialite Elena remembered had been replaced by someone who looked perpetually over her shoulder. She wore designer labels and flawless makeup. But Elena noticed the stiffness in her movements, the guarded way she carried herself, and how her eyes never stopped scanning the room. Thanks for coming, Victoria said, taking the seat across. From Elena, I wasn't sure you'd show after our talk yesterday. Victoria, Elena said, her tone serious, what's really happening here? And don't insult me by pretending this is just about picking flowers and table linens. A flicker of emotion cracked Victoria's polished exterior. James isn't who people think he is. The controlling behavior Richard Blake warned you about. It's gotten worse. He tracks everything: my phone, my emails. He loses his temper if I see anyone he hasn't approved. I barely breathe without him watching. Elena felt a shiver of recognition. She'd seen this before: brides and controlling, abusive relationships that escalated behind closed doors. Have you thought about calling off the wedding? Victoria let out a bitter, hollow laugh. You don't get it. He's already convinced my parents that I'm unstable, that I'm reckless. They think the stuff with you and Marcus proves it. If I don't go through with this wedding, they're threatening to cut me off financially, and James has made it very clear that walking away won't be easy. Elena reached out and took her hand, feeling the tremor beneath her perfect manicure. There are people who can help. You're not alone. With what proof? Victoria whispered. He's too smart for that. He doesn't leave bruises, just fear. And now, with 2 weeks to go and 300 guests expected, my father's business tied to the Sullivan name. There's no backing out. Elena started to grasp just how deep this situation went. So you want me to help you pull off a wedding you don't want? No. Victoria looked her in the eye. I want a planner who can help me disappear instead. As the words hung between them like a fuse waiting to ignite. Everything Elena had assumed about Victoria's motives came crashing down. How this wasn't about revenge or games. This was a cry for help from someone trapped in an abusive engagement. The threats you made yesterday? Elena asked slowly. The stuff about Marcus and me? That was James's doing, Victoria said. He's been digging into your life for weeks, looking for ways to pressure you. He knew threatening your reputation might force you to take this job. Elena's stomach twisted. If I don't help you? Victoria's smile was fragile. Then I marry James Sullivan and disappear from Riverside Heights for good. He's already talking about relocating to his family's estate in South Carolina, somewhere isolated, private. Elena understood now. She could walk away and live with the guilt of doing nothing. Or she could use her expertise to help Victoria escape without destroying her own life. What exactly are you asking me to do? Victoria leaned in, her voice barely audible. Help me vanish? Use your planning skills, your vendor contacts, make it look like a wedding, but one where the bride never walks down the aisle. Elena knew this would be the hardest event she'd ever pull off. It would require every trick in her book, absolute discretion, and people she could trust with more than just a schedule. If I agree to this, she said carefully, we're going to need a tight plan. Redundancies. Allies. Absolute secrecy. Tears welled in Victoria's eyes. You'd really help me? Elena thought of Marcus, of the business she and Sarah had built from the ground up. Then she looked at Victoria, truly looked tanned, saw a woman trying desperately to save herself. Yes, she said, but we do this right. And once it's over, you disappear for real somewhere, James. We'll never find you. Victoria's relief was palpable. Thank you. I know I don't deserve it after everything, but thank you. Elena was already making mental notes. Who they could rely on, what resources they'd need, how to execute an escape disguised. As a fairy tale wedding, Victoria Hayes was about to vanish, but this time, Elena would make sure she did it on her own terms. The crystal ballroom was breathtaking, every detail flawless, every flower in place, but it felt like a minefield. Elena stood at the edge of the reception hall, watching as hundreds of guests found their seats. Her heart pounded. 2 weeks of secret planning had led to this moment, and there was no room for error. Marcus appeared beside her, looking sharp. In his dark suit, he had no idea what was about to unfold. You seem tense, he said quietly. More than usual, even for you? She managed a tight smile. Just want things to go perfectly. Across the room, James Sullivan stood at the altar, charming and confident, surrounded by groomsmen. He looked every bit the picture of a perfect groom, but Elena knew better. And today wasn't about vows. It was about survival. Elena studied him carefully, noting the way his eyes tracked movement throughout the room. The subtle tension in his posture that suggested coiled control. Everything Victoria had told her about his true nature was written in his body language. For anyone trained to look, it's in the bridal suite. Victoria was putting the finishing touches on her makeup while Sarah Mitchell made final adjustments to her dress. To outside observers, Victoria appeared calm and radiant. But Elena could see the careful control it took to maintain that facade. They had rehearsed this moment dozens of times, planning every detail with military precision. The car is positioned exactly where we discussed, Sarah whispered to Victoria while adjusting her veil. Carlos is waiting with the engine running, and your bag is already in the trunk. Carlos Rodriguez, Elena's brother and a trusted photographer, had been recruited. For his ability to move invisibly through wedding venues and his unquestioned loyalty to his sister. His role was simple but crucial: document everything for potential evidence while ensuring. 5 minutes until the processional begins. Everyone knows their part. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria would walk down the aisle as expected, but during the ceremony itself she would excuse herself for a supposed emergency touch-up in the bridal suite. From there, Carlos would escort her through the service corridors Elena had mapped. During venue walkthroughs, to a waiting car that would take her to a safe house David Chen had arranged through his legal connections. Amanda Foster had provided the final, crucial elementa. Secondary bouquet filled with tracking devices, James had insisted, Victoria carry, which would be left behind to buy precious time before anyone realized she was truly gone. Every vendor involved had been carefully chosen for their discretion and their willingness to help someone escape a dangerous situation. The music began, and Elena watched James's face transform into a mask of anticipation. She felt a moment of doubt about the deception they were orchestrating. But then she remembered the fear in Victoria's voice and the bruises she had glimpsed beneath Victoria's makeup during their final planning session. Victoria appeared at the back of the ballroom, a vision in white silk and French lace, her father Robert Hayes offering his arm with obvious pride. Elena had to admire Victoria's composure as she began the long walk toward a man she was planning to abandon at the altar for the second time in her life. The ceremony proceeded normally through the opening remarks and exchange of vows. James spoke eloquently about love and partnership, while Victoria responded with words Elena had helped her craft meaningful enough to avoid suspicion, but carefully devoid of actual promises she couldn't keep. When the officiant reached the traditional moment for objections, Elena held her breath. This was Victoria's cue to excuse herself, claiming a wardrobe malfunction that required immediate attention. But instead of speaking, Victoria stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Elena realized with growing horror that Victoria was losing her nerve, overcome by the magnitude of what she was about to do. Her family's reputation, the financial security her parents had threatened to withdraw the weight of it all, was paralyzing her at the crucial moment. James seemed to sense something was wrong. His smile tightened, and he reached for Victoria's hand with possessive firmness. "Everything all right, darling?" he murmured, loud enough for the front rows to hear, but with an undertone that made Elena's skin crawl. Elena knew she had seconds to act before their carefully constructed plan collapsed entirely. Elena. She stepped forward from her position at the side of the ballroom, moving with purpose toward the altar. "Excuse me," Elena said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "I'm afraid there's been an emergency." James's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and growing anger. "What kind of emergency?" Elena looked directly at Victoria, willing her to understand. "It's a kind that requires immediate action. Victoria, you need to come with me right now." For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, Victoria stared at Elena with a mixture of gratitude and terror. Then she nodded once, decisively, and stepped away from James toward Elena. "Victoria, what are you doing?" James demanded, his carefully maintained facade beginning to crack. "The ceremony isn't finished." "Yes, it is," Victoria said quietly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I can't marry you, James. I won't." The ballroom erupted in confused murmurs as Victoria handed her bouquet to Elena and walked purposefully toward the exit. James started to follow, but Marcus stepped smoothly into his path, creating the distraction Elena and Victoria needed to reach the corridor. Sarah was waiting with Victoria's prepared bag and a change of clothes. Carlos appeared with his camera equipment, having documented everything as evidence of Victoria's voluntary departure. Within minutes, Victoria Hayes had vanished from her own wedding for the second time, but this time with a plan and support system that would keep her safe. 6 months later, Elena received a postcard from Portland, Oregon, with no return address, but a familiar handwriting. "Starting my own business. It's happier than I've ever been. Thank you for everything." It was signed simply V. James Sullivan's reaction to Victoria's escape had been explosive and revealing. His public threats and private attempts to track her down had exposed his true nature to everyone in Riverside Heights, including her parents, who quietly withdrew their support and began distancing themselves from the Sullivan family connections. Elena's business had not only survived the scandal, but flourished. Clients appreciated working with someone who understood that real love sometimes meant having the courage to walk away from the wrong person. Her reputation for handling complex situations with discretion and integrity attracted couples who valued authenticity over appearances. Marcus proposed to Elena on a quiet Tuesday evening in her office, surrounded by inspiration boards and vendor catalogs. In the space where their relationship had truly begun, their wedding 6 months later was everything Victoria's ceremonies had not been: intimate, genuine, and filled with people who celebrated their happiness without reservation. As Elena walked down the aisle toward Marcus, she thought about the strange journey that had brought them together. Victoria's abandonment had devastated Marcus, but ultimately freed him to find real love. Elena's decision to help Victoria escape had nearly destroyed her business, but established her reputation as someone who fought for what was right. Standing at the altar with Marcus, Elena realized that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as disasters, and the best revenge against those who try to hurt you is simply living well and helping others do the same. Victoria Hayes had tried to manipulate her into planning a fake wedding, but instead had given Elena the chance to orchestrate the most important rescue of her career. Their kiss, as a newly married couple, was witnessed by everyone who mattered to them, sealing not just their commitment to each other, but their shared understanding that real love was worth fighting for, protecting, and celebrating with joy rather than obligation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.